Ladies and gentlemen, listeners of the Unregistered podcast, I need to tell you that this week is the biggest week in the history of Renegade University. On Friday, that's Black Friday, we will be offering huge discounts on everything that is offered at RU. That includes the brand new video course, Talkin' Shit, The History of African American Culture, which is co-taught by Kamasi Hill and me. It was a live webinar, but now we will be making it a video course that's available for any member of RU. Also, we have a new live webinar happening in January, the first 3 Tuesdays in January. This will be co-taught by James Lindsay and me. It's called Post-Modernism, Critical Theory, and American Politics. And this one will sell fast, so I highly recommend you getting your tickets soon, especially with that Black Friday deal we're offering. Go to renegadeuniversity.com and check out the deal. Also, if you're in the Seattle area, on December 5th, you should come see me speak at the Libertarian Party of King County annual holiday party. Get your tickets, get the details on the event by going to lpkingcounty.com, and I hope to see you there. Now, let's start the show. This is the Unregistered podcast, and I'm Thaddeus Russell. This is a show about ideas, people, and behaviors that are considered inappropriate, out of bounds, or beyond the pale. The things you're not supposed to talk about if you're a school teacher, a college professor, a businessman, a politician, a parent, a neighbor, or even a podcast host. These are the things you're not supposed to say or even think if you're a good liberal, a good conservative, or a good citizen. Each week, I'll interview a person who has something bad to say. They might be a journalist or a professor. They might be a porn star or a drug dealer. They might just be an ordinary person with an ordinary job who doesn't care about the rules of polite society. I'm not interested in breaking the rules just to be a troublemaker. I'm interested in people who break the rules of conventional thought and to expand the scope of what is possible to say in our society. I'm interested in people who make me think. If you're a comedian who wants to be taken seriously as a political commentator, you better know more about politics than most pundits do. If you're a radical who is always cutting against the grain, you better be sharp as hell. In other words, you better be like my guest this week. This is my interview with Dave Smith. I am joined from the suburbs of America now. It's very disappointing, I'm sorry to say, by the great Dave Smith, who has recently moved out of New York City for the first time basically in your whole life, right?
Yeah, that is right. I've lost my edge.
Oh my God, dude. What are we going to do with you? You're over 30 and you live in the suburbs. We're supposed to put you to the gallows, I believe.
I think so. If I am remembering my Marxist training correctly, that's it for me. I'm not to be trusted.
That was more like a quick left-wing history here. That was more like Abby Hoffman, the Yippies, and the New Left. Or like, don't trust anybody over 30. You know, the youth movement of the 60s. Man, you have fucking. Well, you're also a comic. You're not supposed to live in the suburbs. You're supposed to be unhappy.
Yeah, it seems to bother some people, but yes, I've opted for happiness rather than the perpetual miserable comedian role.
Discomfort. I mean, you have to be uncomfortable to be a good comic, right? Isn't that the rule?
Yeah. Well, I think perhaps I've banked up enough years of discomfort that I can keep that edge.
I mean, on a serious tip, to speak black just for a second.
Yes.
I mean, I remember there's a the show he had where it was like a narrative. He had one episode where, did you see it? Where he's hanging out with one of his old comic friends and the guy kills himself at the end. And it's just like, oh my God, this job, this is the worst profession. Like,
I don't remember that episode.
It was so depressing. The whole point of the damn episode was basically, being a comedian, being a stand-up comic is like so depressing. It makes people want to kill themselves.
There is a lot of depression amongst comedians for sure, but I don't know how necessary it is. I'm not sure. It's definitely correlated.
Definitely. I mean, so not just depression, but just all sorts of mental health issues, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah, for sure.
what do you see? You hang out with them more than I do.
Yeah, it's a weird group of people. And it's it's a group of people who clearly were driven to attain validation of strangers. So right away, that's going to bring in kind of a weird group. And it's also, I'm sure there's some psychological, angle on humor as a defense mechanism. So people who have really built up that skill have probably are compensating for something. So I don't know that I completely understand it, but there is a range. I mean, there's very happy people who are very funny. I mean, Jim Gaffigan's got like 5 kids and a wife, and he's
famously happy. Yeah.
Yes. Right. Yeah. So, I mean, who the hell knows? I don't know Jim that well, but he seems pretty happy.
Exactly.
But so I don't know. But today everything's flipped upside down. So like today, it's almost like I feel like being like having a wife and a kid and living in the burbs is almost like the edgiest thing a comedian could do. Like that's the new punk rock thing.
Actually, you're right. I mean, in a way, like haven't the hottest, you might even argue the best, I suppose, in big quotes, comedians of like the last 5 to 10 years have been clean stand-ups like Jim Gaffigan, actually, right?
I mean,
like Brian Regan started it off. I mean, he's phenomenally talented. Like there's no one funnier than those guys, but they're completely clean and vanilla.
Yeah. There's been like a lot of, like, you've probably seen people on like Twitter and stuff like make this comment over like the last 4 or 5 years where they'll say things like the left can't be funny. Like that's kind of like the generalization, which is bullshit, by the way, because like historically the left are like the funniest fucking people, like the best artists, the best people, the people who are really breaking the mold of society were all leftists. It's not a left or right can't be funny. It's that conformists can't be funny. And the kind of era of wokeism has boxed in so many comedians to be afraid to do anything other than repeat the approved opinions, and that is impossible to be funny within. So it's this very, very weird realignment. There's so many realignments going on in our society, but that's one of them.
My feeling, like I just said this to someone, it's gone like 360 like several times, so I can't even like figure out like which end is up now anymore, like which revolution we're at the end of anymore, you know what I mean? Like so one last personal question and then we'll talk about politics. So your daughter Layla is almost 2 years old. She's going to turn 2 next month, right? I was a dad. Now you've just fled to the suburbs, but you were in New York with her, and I was a dad in New York City when my son was 2. Same age, and for several years after that. And like right then, man, when he was about Layla's age, I mean, it was just, I've said many times, like probably 7 or 8 of the most like magical, beautiful moments of my life were just from him in those first 2 years, right? I mean, talk to me about being a dad. I haven't done it in a while, like in that way, of a small child, and it's I want to relive it through you.
Oh, it's just it's unbelievable. It's like every day, particularly right now at this age, about to be 2. It's like you notice, you find out every single day that they knew something you didn't realize they knew. There's a new word, or there's a new thought, or there's just something really funny or really cute. It's really magical, man. I mean, to just watch your baby, you have this thing that's a baby, and then you watch it becoming a person, and it's just beautiful. I mean, it's like, it's this weird feeling where like I try to remind myself almost daily how much I'm going to miss this moment someday, and how much I should try to enjoy it. And then I get conflicted because I'm just thinking about how much I miss her being 1 and how I'll never have her at 1 back.
I know.
But now I'm like, okay, idiot, well, enjoy 2 because you're about to feel that way about 2. And then, and I'm right in both senses. She has just so many things that are just so fun. I had the news on the other day, and Joe Biden was speaking, and she just walked up to the TV and pointed up to the TV and went, "Grandpa." And I was like, that's just like the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life. I was like, yeah, kind of. He's kind of like your grandpa, just not quite as sharp as your grandpa. But he's but you get it. You basically get it.
And a lot meaner.
Yes. With a lot more blood on his hands.
Yeah, he likes to lock people up.
Yeah, I mean, your grandpa might have beat a guy up or 2 in his day, but this guy's got corpses.
Body count like no other grandpa.
Yeah.
Oh my God. So as you know, I was born and raised by two commies, and they were at the height of their communist mania when I was a kid, basically until I was about 10, 12. Now, the thing is, the one thing I will say about my parents, and I just don't recall any, at least heavy-handed indoctrination. Like, I don't recall them like ever sitting me down and being like, okay, well, the class struggle is the most important thing, and you have to align yourself with the proletariat for the blah. I don't remember any of that, actually, and which I'm really grateful for. Now, then again, when you're born into a church in a way, they don't need to indoctrinate you much, because all of our friends were also socialists pretty much. You know, when I was in Berkeley in the 1970s, so like everybody's on the left, everybody, the dogs are on the left. But, you know, so with my son, you know, highly political guy here, you know, I really didn't, I got to tell you, I just, when I see people like taking their kids on marches and putting t-shirts on them when they're 2 years old, like Layla's age, with a political statement on it, I just want to throw up like all through my body. Like it just, it's the most revolting thing. But then again, you know, what are you going to do? You and I are so political, and we think and talk about this every single day. Like, they're not going to be shielded from it. They're going to know, and they're going to want to emulate us. They're going to assume that what we say is right. This is a really important thing to understand, right? You and I could be completely full of shit. You know, we could be completely wrong, and the crime bill could have been like the greatest law ever passed, and we need just a tougher one, right? That could be the truth, Dave, you know. But, you know, I was really, really careful to do my best not to like deliberately, consciously indoctrinate Toby. And I would tell him all the way through his childhood, even to this day, you know, hey man, listen, this is your dad's point of view. And by the way, your dad's point of view is really, really unusual. In fact, you won't find anyone else with it, pretty much. Right. So know that. But how do you deal with that question? I mean, it's a little early now, but like, what do you think about?
I don't know. I think about how I have a younger brother who's much younger than me. He's like 13 years younger than me. And he's interested in a lot of these ideas. And so I know the way I approach it with him, I don't know, maybe, you know, I have obviously a different type of emotional relationship with my daughter, but my thing with him is very similar to that. Like, I like to let him know what I think, but I always present it with, look, this is what I think, and this is why I believe this. Right. I'm much more aggressive in poking holes in the bullshit propaganda that he received in high school and in college and things like that. So I'm much more like, look, if I'm not going to propagandize my brother, you sure as shit aren't going to be able to propagandize my brother. So I'll poke holes in some of that stuff. But ultimately, I do kind of leave it like, look, this is what makes sense to me. I don't know. What do you think about it? And I'm very truly libertarian in that sense, that I have no desire to impose my worldview on my family. I don't, you know, I'd like to explain to them what my worldview is, but I don't wish to like control my brother. And hopefully I can be that chill with my daughter.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the question, I guess, is, you know, what if she becomes your worst political nightmare? You know, people have asked, I mean, my son has asked me, they said, so Dad, like, what if I go, you know, work for one of the major political parties, you know, in DC, like as a lawyer or a lobbyist or something like that? I'm like, well, I will still love you, I promise you. But, well, I mean,
right. I mean, you will still love your kid, of course, no matter what, but that would be something that I would try to persuade her.
Oh, you would? Oh, you
would? Well, I would certainly, I would give her the reasons why I think that that's a poor choice. And hopefully that would make sense to her too.
But maybe it's not a poor choice. Maybe Layla's maybe she's a little like imperialist dictator, you know, let her go her way, you know.
Well, it's not a bad idea. And this is true, I think, for everyone who's interested in ideas of any kind, not just politics, but it's not a bad idea to operate under the assumption that you could be wrong.
Yeah.
And that it is possible that you could be wrong. And I like to think, I mean, if I didn't have a little bit of that, I never would have ended up here where I am now. Mm-hmm. So I like to try to keep that attitude, but just, you know, luckily for me, I'm right about everything. And so, you know, no one's really ever going to convince me of that. So there's my contradiction.
So you could be wrong about some things, huh? So,
sure. I'm sure I am.
No, I know. Well, you have changed your politics around certain things, even in recent years, right? So, which is, by the way, to me, there's nothing more admirable. straight up. Like, I don't even care which direction you moved in. Like, just that someone can do that, especially like relatively late in a political life, to do that is really rare and really admirable. As it's a commitment to me. My first principle is intellectualism. And what I mean by that is just open inquiry. I don't
Right.
mean like being a fancy professor. I mean just being interested in ideas in themselves, right?
Yeah.
And being open to
Well,
them.
you also you realize that I guess this isn't like a universal truth. I know you don't like universal truths,
No.
so this isn't a universal truth.
Thank you.
But I would say that just about every political, intellectual school of thought has something that you could benefit from. Like there's got to be something. I mean, look, even if I'm reading some, left winger, who's, they might be arguing against libertarianism, and maybe I still come to the conclusion that I'm a libertarian at the end of, reading their argument. But even in situations where that's happened, I've gained something from what they're saying. Like there's some point there. I mean, I remember arguing with Ben Burgess, who's a democratic socialist. I had him on my podcast a couple times, and I was on his as well. And he was making a point that that the distinction between voluntary and coerced is really not such a black line, that there's large areas of gray, and that there are people who are in situations where essentially they have no other options, and their boss is basically their dictator, and they have no choice but to do what he says. And like, okay, at the end of the day, after processing that, I don't think that's an argument against libertarianism that's satisfactory to me, but there is some truth to it. I mean, it's something to think about. Like, voluntary exchanges are kind of a spectrum. They're not just black and white. And the poorer your circumstances are, the more you're kind of naturally, I don't like using the word coerced, but certainly pushed into a decision that you might make voluntarily. And there's something to be gained from just thinking about that a bit and taking it into account.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that way of thinking. It's very similar to an argument I've been yelling at libertarians for about 10 years now, ever since I encountered them. I mean, but I also agree with you. It doesn't necessarily overthrow the ideology.
Yeah, well, right, exactly. No, I remember saying this when I had Robbie Suave from Reason Magazine on my podcast, and who I really like a lot. But I think I made him really uncomfortable when I said it. But I was like, look, dude, you can benefit from reading all types of different people. I was like, I've read neo-Nazis and benefited from what they had to say. And he was kind of like, whoa, I don't know if we want to say that. But it is an honest thing. And the thing that I would say I benefited just from was just really taking into account how incredibly fucked up the Treaty of Versailles and the American military campaign against the German people was.
Oh, hell yeah.
And that nobody really ever, feels for those people. And, it's much easier if you just say, well, Hitler is literally the devil, and therefore every German person is literally the devil. And we are to not shed one tear for the innocent women and children who are just slaughtered for being around them, basically. And it's like, hey, you know what? For all the other evil shit in there, that's a really fair point.
90% of the Wehrmacht, the German military during World War II, was conscripts, slaves. Okay.
And how old were they?
Yeah, right. 18, 19, whatever.
Yeah.
And they were not anywhere close to being members of the Nazi party. The tiny, tiny percentage of the population was Nazi. I get fucking furious, like with these movies like Dunkirk and 1917, or not, well, that's but whatever. Dunkirk, certainly, where actually Americans are so stupid they did it with 1917. They assume that's kind of, in fact, that's the argument in that damn movie, is that like there's this German culture that becomes necessarily totalitarian unless you like kill half their civilian population. But, it's like every German soldier depicted in World War II is assumed to be a Nazi. These days, it's pretty much every single day that I get a message from an unregistered listener, usually accompanied with a photo of their Paloma Verde CBD order. They're showing me and telling me that they're getting handwritten notes from the owners with their orders, and this is a testament to what kind of a company Paloma Verde CBD is. It's owned and operated by Carlos and Vanessa Abelar out of San Antonio, Texas. Back in the winter, they had a brick and mortar store that was all set up, it was gorgeous and ready to go, and of course then the government decided to shut down all of society, so they lost their investment, their time, their money that they put into that store, and they tried to do sales online, and they reached out to me to help get the word out, which I was very happy to do. Meanwhile, they were being told by banks that they couldn't get loans or even bank accounts because they were a, quote, marijuana-related business, which is absurd. There is no THC whatsoever in Paloma Verde CBD products. You can't get high no matter how much you take of them. Now, unregistered listeners ain't stupid. They love supporting a good cause like this, an independent entrepreneurial company that has made it against all the odds and against the opposition of much of our culture and institutions. But they also are big fans of Paloma Verde because they get incredible deals that they will not get anywhere else on CBD. Paloma Verde very, very generously is giving us 25% off every single product in their store. But then on top of that, if you join their mailing list, you get another 10% off. So if you're a new customer, you're probably going to get 35% off your first order. Also, Carlos and Vanessa have put together my 3 favorite products into what's called the Unregistered Combo Pack, also known as the Thad Pack. And for that, you get 33% off all 3 of these products. So what they are: the delicious candies known as their gummies, which also contain 10 milligrams of CBD in each one. Their soft gels, which I have been known to take 6 of in a day, depending on what's going on in the news and in my life, I will admit. And then my favorite thing, which I've talked about a lot, is their high potency tincture. You put some drops under your tongue, and I promise you, you will feel better. I did that right before I started recording this, as a matter of fact. For all of that, you get 33% off. Go to palomaverdestore.com, use the discount code RENEGADE. You get 25% off each product, any product, 10% off by joining their mailing list, and then you can get the Thad Pack, the Unregistered Combo Pack, for 33% off. palomaverdestore.com, discount code RENEGADE. Make your body and your life better, and I thank you.
Right. Right.
No, they've been enslaved by the Nazi party, and they're much more likely to be anti-Nazi and certainly non-Nazi than Nazi. It was like less than 10% of the whole population, but 90% were enslaved as conscripts to fight in that war by Hitler. It pisses me off, man. Like, and then they're getting civilians, as you just said, by the millions getting killed by the Allies, right? Just because they happen to live there, right?
Yeah. And all of a sudden I'm supposed to pretend that like the tag team of Churchill, Stalin, and FDR are like these great humanitarians or something like that. It's like, listen, there's a lot of evil all around and a lot of innocent people victimized all around. It's not nearly as black and white as people like to make it out to be.
There's a solid argument that Churchill's the greatest war criminal of the 20th century. I mean,
sure.
he's way up there. But anyway, fuck all that for a second. So let's see. Yeah, I was going to ask you something about fatherhood. But you've been, everybody wants me to ask you about like your turn to social conservatism and get Dave to like resolve the contradiction between libertarianism and his new social conservatism and his embrace of closed borders. So you're a closed borders guy now?
No, I've never been for closed borders, and I don't even know what the term means. I mean, I'm sure there are some right wingers who are for closed borders, but in the libertarian space, literally nobody is for closed borders. It's just like a term to insult someone or misrepresent what they think. Hans Hermann Hoppe is not for closed borders. Lou Rockwell's not for closed borders. None of them are. What Hans Hermann Hoppe, I think, proposed was an invitee situation. So basically like you could be invited in but the person would have to like assume financial responsibility for you. Which I think is fairly reasonable. I don't know what the perfect solution is. All I've really said is that I think that open borders under current situations would be disastrous. I think it would work out very, very bad. Yeah. And that I think that there are arguments there are open border arguments that are libertarian, and there are some good ones, but there are also arguments against open borders that are libertarian that are also pretty compelling. And that's basically as much as I've taken a position on it.
Mostly having to do with the welfare state, right? Is there another one? I mean, I know that argument, which is
there's arguments about the welfare state, voting rights, things along that nature. But there's also just this argument, which is kind of like the argument that later Rothbard, Hoppe, and Lou Rockwell have put forward, which is basically that if you really follow libertarian logic and you say that taxation is theft, the government is a band of criminals writ large, all that stuff, it's like, okay, but that would make public property stolen property, not unowned necessarily, in the same sense that if someone mugged you and then walked down the block with your money and started giving it out, you wouldn't say, well, that's an unowned wallet. It's like, well, no, that's yours that this person now has stolen. And if you can recoup it, you have a higher claim to it than some random person who he's handing it out to. So the argument therefore would be that the government just inviting people in when on public land, that it's really, there is a legitimate argument for the citizens of that country, the people who have been expropriated by this government, to have some type of say in what the process is. And the truth is that open borders, if you poll it, gets less than 20% approval. People don't want open borders in this country.
Sure.
And if the government is forcefully taking their money, building all these public roads, and then opening the borders up, it's kind of, it's at least a gray area of whether that's a consensual behavior. It's not the same thing, for free trade or something like that, right? Anytime there's a deal done between people in different countries, there are two consenting parties to that. It doesn't happen unless both of the businesses here and abroad want to do it. However, with immigration, someone just leaves their country and comes to America. It's not clear at all whether the people in that group wanted this transaction. And we have anti-discrimination laws. We have, this is all over the place, and housing and work and all of these things. So it's a gray area for sure.
I guess on this question for libertarians like you, I guess it's you're balancing your hatred of taxation as theft on the one hand, right? Versus your hatred, I'm sure, of states, nation states in this case, stopping people from moving their bodies across borders, right? I mean, and so those are two very core hatreds in the libertarian worldview, and I share them, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
But for me, the taxation, I'll just say this, the taxation is theft thing, I think you guys are right, basically. I mean, I don't see how you can argue against that, actually. But for me, it's it doesn't, just in my hierarchy of values, it's not as high as movement, physical.
Sure,
ability to migrate.
Even that. But I mean, like, truthfully, well, certainly, like, I don't care about, like, even my own tax rate being a few points higher as I do about, like, some kid being thrown in a cage or something like that. I mean, that's much more morally egregious. But to the philosophical point, I mean, the freedom of movement or the freedom of speech or any of these things are kind of abstractions. I mean, what we really believe in is property rights and self-ownership. I mean, like, you don't have freedom of movement through someone else's house, right? Like, you don't have freedom. You don't have a right to just go wherever you want to go. Now, the problem comes in that government borders are illegitimate borders. And they're basically just decreed through fiat and force. Right. And so it's like, okay, is that really legitimate for a government to tell you can't move here just because we drew a line down? And obviously the libertarian answer is no, it's completely illegitimate. But just because government doesn't have a legitimate claim to the property doesn't necessarily mean that the local taxpayers and some foreigner have the exact same legitimate claim to the property. So again, this is where it gets murky. And as with most things, the only answer that could neatly solve this problem is to privatize everything. And then it's real simple. Make private borders, and people can come if they're invited, and they can't if they're not. The same way everything else works. The same way if you want to move from New York to New Jersey, no one's having a deep conversation about this. It's just like, I don't know, go find an apartment, and you can't just force all of New Jersey taxpayers to pay for you to move there. But yeah, you can go. Like, that would be the ideal solution.
Okay, so you're against open borders because you hate Mexicans. Okay, so we got that.
Exactly.
And then,
thank you. Man, you got right to the point a lot quicker than I did.
Just to clear that out, and I didn't want to confuse the audience anymore. So, yeah, the Layla and your politics, right? I mean, I kind of kind of try to get at this with you when you and Nick Gillespie did the thing with me in Brooklyn, and then Nick filibustered the show, so I didn't really get to talk to you much.
I recall. I
Yes.
remember.
I had to remind him a couple times that I was the host, but it's fine. Love Nick. It was a great night. Anyway, I was trying to get at, and you did talk about this, and I don't want to actually spend that much time on it unless you want to, but how being a dad has changed your politics, in particular on the issue of abortion. And I suppose you've also been, I think you've also been especially like concerned about sort of pedophilia, I guess is what you would say it, or just sort of pedophilic representations in the media in particular, right? Like you're not a big fan, like the whole cutie scandal, and I suppose other things, right? You're pretty critical of, and not just of sexualizing children, but of hypersexual sort of depictions of women in general, right?
Well, I don't know if I'm, in a different way. I mean, I think that, obviously these things, it's hard to draw exactly like a black and white line, but in terms of like sexualizing children, I mean, I think there should be lines where it's straight up illegal, and I favor a private law society, but whatever has to do it has to do it. I mean, I don't think, I think that like, and cuties to me seem to be on the border. I mean, I don't know if it should be illegal or not, but I certainly find it disgusting.
Did you watch the movie though? Did you see the movie?
I did not watch the movie, but I watched the final scene of the movie. On the Legion of Skanks podcast. They made me do it, and so I can't speak to the film, like as an artistic piece. Right. But I understand where people are like appalled by it. And in terms, I don't know. It's like the idea that I've become some social conservative. I certainly wouldn't describe myself that way. I think I'm sure to some degree, as I've gotten older and settled down and have a family and a kid, okay, maybe I value family life and some of the traditional aspects of culture a little bit more than I used to. I just think it's more that the left has become radically more insane, and I don't agree with that. I mean, I don't think it's like some unique, like Joe Biden, the centrist, conservative Democrat, is now in a position where when he's running for president, he gets asked a question in a CNN town hall: what do you think about 7-year-olds transitioning? And he goes, absolutely, they have to be able to transition genders if that's what they decide to do. And we have to be, supportive of this. And I'm sorry, I think that's batshit crazy. And I'm not going to be intimidated out of saying that. And that's not like an alt-right view. That's not like some right-wing view. This is what normal people think. A lot of them are intimidated to not say it, but I think that's really, really weird and not good. I don't know.
Yeah. Gosh, I've kind of ping-ponged myself on this issue a bit. I have many, many things to say about this. I'll just tell you a little story though. Like I have I definitely am sympathetic to the idea that encouraging in any way children to do anything medical, right, to transition, I think that's not a good idea. I would never do that. However, I've been very skeptical of the whole trans trend, and it clearly is a trend, right? And so I live in the Bay Area where there's quite a few trans people, and there's this sudden new population of trans children everywhere. There's lots of trans children popping up everywhere, right? In a place like this, you wonder, how much of this is real and how much of this is the trend. So anyway, I was told that a friend of mine had a friend who had a daughter who had become a boy at the age of something like 8 or 9 or 10, somewhere around there, definitely a kid. And I immediately was skeptical before I met the kid, and I just thought, bullshit, Berkeley, fuck that. They've like indoctrinated. They think it's cool to be trans now. But I met the kid, and I gotta say, it seemed completely genuine and authentic. And this was like, a 4th or 5th grader. And I was sort of chastened a bit about that. Now, so I don't know. I mean, Katie Herzog, I think, has been totally right about this stuff. There's like clearly all this insane peer pressure to cut off breasts for lesbians and for children to be encouraged or even, to medicalize their transition, which I think is kind of horrific because it's irreversible. It's just the weirdest thing that we're debating,
I agree. I'm sure that there are, I at least assume that there are people who really do want to be And I wouldn't even be surprised if on some physiological level are more are somewhat kind of on the spectrum closer to the, you know, like born a man, but is kind of has feminine characteristics and perhaps would be happier and have a better life living as a woman. And so I'm not, you know, okay, fine for them. And if that's how they feel as a kid, I suppose I you know, I don't have a problem with them maybe living that way. I really have to draw a line on giving anything permanent. Hormone blockers, surgery to children, I think is like really a horrific thing to do. But that being said, it's like, okay, there might be a certain number of people that fall into that category. But it's pretty obvious that this is a huge propaganda, you know, machine at this point, pushing this on children. And the truth is that 5, 6, 7, 8-year-olds are incredibly malleable. And a lot of times these ideas are put into their head. And I'm sure that, you know, if a 6 or 7-year-old like came to you and said, listen, I really feel like I'm this sex instead of this sex, there's an appropriate way to handle that. It would probably be having a long conversation with them. Where did you get these ideas? Why do you feel this way? Really digging around and figuring out what's going on there. And I'm pretty certain that in the vast majority of these cases, none of that is happening. That is then just celebrated as this amazing thing, which in itself is going to convince a lot of 6, 7-year-olds to say something, because kids like attention and validation and all of these things. And so I just think there's something really sick that we're building up as a culture that I don't like. I don't think is good.
Yeah, when I just found out recently that the practice of cutting, you know, for adolescent girls, I didn't realize that was an actual trend. Like, it's proven. Like the case is like spiked, I guess, in the early 2000s or something, and then kind of declined since then. You know, so these things, and by the way, this is all rich people culture.
Yeah,
this is all rich people stuff. Right? We have the time, we have the ability, you know, we don't have to worry about survival. You know, I'm talking about Americans, generally speaking. Even the poorest Americans are wealthier than much of the rest of the world. So,
yeah.
And that's, I think, by the way, that really is what most American, quote, politics is these days. The stuff that most Americans engage in is superficial. Right?
Yeah, but you know, well, I agree. And there's a really weird kind of disconnect. I remember when Bhaskar Sankara debated Gene Epstein. I don't know if you ever saw that.
I saw a bit of it.
So they had a really interesting debate. I was there for it. It's up on Reason, their YouTube channel, if you want to check it out. But one of the points that Gene Epstein made, it was a socialism versus capitalism debate. And one of the points that Gene Epstein made that I thought was like a really devastating point was that, you know, so Bhaskar is like a true democratic socialist, not Bernie Sanders, like a real, every company should be organized.
He's the editor of Jacobin, for those who don't know.
Yes. And his position is that every company should be worker co-ops, and they should democratically vote on decisions the company makes. And Gene was making the point that he was like, well, listen, in a capitalist free market, if there's a profit to be made in some area, any entrepreneur can go into that area. Whereas in your system, you need a vote of the majority. So do you really want to rely, Gene Epstein was saying, on the vote of the majority of workers to decide how many Qurans should be produced in our society, to decide how much birth control should be produced in our society? Or do you want to say, if a capitalist wants to go into that field, the will of the workers be damned, he can go and provide that to the market that wants it? And to me, this was a really fascinating point. I had to think about this for like months, but there really is this crazy disconnect in America right now between the social progressivism that goes along with these people who claim to be for the workers. Like, they claim to be for the workers, yet the major problem they have is that the workers are culturally nothing like them. Workers, the working class in America likes Miller Lite and NASCAR, and they go to Hooters and they watch Jerry Springer. Like, they're not into your LGBTQ shit. Like, that is only the elites who get into that stuff. And I also think some of this is true with libertarian types who are very into this kind of socially leftist stuff. And it's like, look, this does not represent most real people. This is why when that tape of Donald Trump saying grab him by the pussy's leaked, everyone in the corporate press said, well, that's it. He's done. No one ever speaks like this at our dinner parties.
Right.
But average Joe six-pack American was like, yeah, like what? Who cares?
Right.
This is nothing. Like, have you ever been to a barbecue before?
Right.
And by the way, this is particularly true of like black people in the hood. Like I grew up in Brooklyn. I've known black people and actually hung out in black neighborhoods. They're not politically correct would probably be the last thing you would describe them as if you had 100,000 adjectives.
Totally. I just had Cooley Bravo, who's a rapper, on my show, and he was like, black people ain't liberals. Black people ain't black. He said, black liberals are a minority within a minority. This is some bullshit that we're being portrayed as liberals, being captured basically as liberals. Is complete nonsense on all kinds of issues. They're not liberals.
I mean, black people do vote for the Democrats. I mean, that's true. But black people are super religious, in many ways very socially conservative, and wildly and wonderfully politically incorrect.
Yep.
If you want to just get the like unfiltered thoughts on every group of people, go into the hood, talk to some black dudes. They will tell you everything right away. It's like white people are like this, Asian people are like this, the Mexicans don't play, so you got to watch out for the Mexican. Like it's wonderful and it's amazing. That's so weird about the Democratic tent that carries all of these different groups in it that have nothing in common.
Yeah, I mean the Republicans are like that too. I mean they all need to split apart, and they will, I think, eventually. By the way, so man, what do you think about the election fraud issue? Like I can't see how something funny didn't happen, you know. And
well, I mean it's a ridiculous idea to ever trust government elections. Like,
I mean,
ever.
The idea. I mean, so when I started pushing this, like I was just, and all I was doing was reporting on the evidence, like all the crazy numbers, like 93,000 people just voted for Trump and no one else on the ticket in Georgia. I mean, I'm sorry, for Biden.
For Biden, yeah.
And only 900 did that for Trump. It was in stuff like that. But what was I going to say? So yeah, I was hoping that would reveal the Democrats for the true mafia family that they are, and especially the Clinton-Obama wing, right? And squash that wing, which has, by the way, stolen an election essentially from Bernie Sanders too. So they're quite capable of it. And also, by the way, so I put this out there, and people were like, I could just sense the eyebrows raising, even among like friends of mine. I could just feel it, that I was kind of on the edge there, on the limb. Yeah. But tell me, who has not demonstrated greater motivation to cheat in an election to get someone out of office in the Democratic Party in the last 4 to 5 years?
Yeah.
What have they not done?
No, I was just responding to a video that some Bernie Sanders supporter made about me, where he was saying it was crazy to question the election. I'm like, you're a Bernie Sanders supporter?
You're right.
And you won't even like entertain the possibility that an election could be stolen from somebody. It's really weird, man. 2020 has been a hell of a year. And we all, there's like these things, right, where the unpopular opinions or possibly the unpopular truths that are, there'll be like these things that are kind of difficult to say, that you're like, oh, this might get a lot of pushback, this might piss a lot of people off if I say this. But then there are moments where they really heighten them. Like if when you could say like normally, hey, I don't think we should be in Syria, I don't think we should be fighting that war. But when it looked like Donald Trump was actually going to pull troops out a year and a half ago, all of a sudden it's like, we have to protect the Kurds. And if you don't care about the Kurds, you're like a blood-soaked monster. And then everyone in the news is kind of like, oh, I don't know, I better not say anything. Oh, I really care about the Kurds. No one cares about the Kurds. Of course not. Literally a month later, abandoning the Kurds is like America's pastime. Like we do it every 5 years. It's
exactly.
Like, no one cares. But for that moment, this was the thing. And there are these little things like, that we all feel that they just decide, like, you're not allowed to compare COVID to the flu. You can't do that. You can't say the word herd immunity. Like these are like buzzwords and right now talking about election fraud is kind of that thing, like you say it and people snap back, and people are very, very well trained to take their cues. Okay, this is the thing you're not allowed to say now, and snap back. But if you try to zoom out a little bit and maybe even question the whole COVID, narrative a little bit, seeing as how it's been pretty much disproven at this point, that, there's no evidence that lockdowns work, no evidence that mask mandates work, all of this shit.
Yeah.
you go, okay, so what happened here? There was a president for the first time in my lifetime who was opposed by the entire ruling elite.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean you have to like Donald Trump. I don't, but it's interesting. This is the first president of my lifetime who was openly opposed by the CIA, the FBI, the NSA,
Right.
all of Hollywood, all of the corporate press, both the Democrat
both
and
parties.
Yes, both parties, both
Yeah.
establishment parties, right? Okay.
Yeah.
And then going into his election year, we completely remade the country and completely overhauled how we vote. Like, this is supposed to be something that we don't really think about or discuss in depth. Completely overhauled how we vote to this way that we've never tried to do before on a national level. And as this comes in now, Donald Trump gets basically the in-person voting, the traditional way of voting. He wins a landslide, dominates in a shocking way, millions more votes than he got in 2016.
Wow.
But then with this new form of voting, Joe Biden gets more votes than Barack Obama. Joe Biden, a man who didn't campaign, gets more votes than Barack Obama. It seems at least like some eyebrows might be raised.
And and more blacks, people of color voted for Trump than any Republican since whatever it was, 1960 or something like that.
Yeah, it was the 60s. I forget when.
Eisenhower or some shit like that. Yeah, like, I mean, and he was supposed to do worse against the author of the crime bill, which is known now by many African Americans, than with Trump, than Obama. Are you crazy? That's impossible.
Yeah. Well, also there are usually signs like, okay, like George W. Bush was an absolute failure. I mean, there's no question about it, you know, by anyone's metric. I mean, he got us 2 wars that were both messes, I mean, the worst recession.
Unless you're Bill Kristol, but yeah. I mean.
Yes, there is a good point. Some weapons companies were thrilled with George W. Bush's administration. But, you know, and what was the result of you know, after his 8 years, the election? It's like, okay, well, the Democrats control the House, the Democrats control the Senate. Barack Hussein Obama is elected president, a guy who just a couple years earlier would have seemed unelectable. Obama was a disaster. At the end of Obama's 8 years, Republican Senate, Republican House, and Donald freaking Trump is elected president. But at the end of Trump, which is supposed to be this epic disaster as painted by the corporate press, you've got Republicans making gains in the House, Republicans keeping the Senate, and Donald Trump getting millions of votes more than he did last time. So, like, something isn't adding up to the narrative. And then the more specific stuff, I mean, look, there are all of these poll watchers for the Republicans claiming they wouldn't let them in. I don't know exactly how true the claims are, but there's a lot of them claiming that. The vote counting was suspended in like 5 major cities for hours, and then all of a sudden votes for Biden started flooding in.
At 4 a.m.?
Yeah, at 4 a.m. I mean, it's like there are some questions to be had here for sure.
Yeah, the whole ballot dump of hundreds of thousands of votes that were 100% for Biden that were discovered in 3 different states, key states, at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
What?
You know, nothing to see here.
And I'm a racist for suggesting that that's fishy. Like, you know,
and not just that, but that it's like that you're a racist and a Trump supporter.
Well, yeah,
which is like the most, you know, it's like it's so fucking insulting. And just so, I don't know, it's just like frustrating that you're like, so we're lucky enough to live through this fascinating moment where in history where all of these things are happening. And I'm not allowed to have like an interesting conversation about it. I just have to be put into a box. And it's amazing how hard binary thinkers will work to force you into that box.
Yep.
Like I've literally had like interactions with people. I mean, like Twitter interactions, but a few in real life too. But like, well, they'll be like, well, you're just a Trump supporter. And I'll just respond by saying, I think Donald Trump should be charged with war crimes and either put to death or spend the rest of his life in jail. And I've gotten the response back for that. It goes, yeah, that's just what you say so you can be a secret Trump supporter. Yeah. That's what's more likely, that I'm a Trump supporter advocating that he get tried and publicly hung, or that you're trying to force me into a box that I don't really fit into.
That's one to ponder. I know. And like, what was it? Like 1 week before the election, I think it was, the fucker puts on Twitter the thing about, we're going to bring patriotic, in all caps, education back to the American school system. Wow. Like, Does anyone understand how far that is from Thad Russell's thinking? I mean, that's the opposite of me. But like,
Well, right,
to
right.
accuse me of being a Trump supporter, as fuck, that he can suck my
Yeah,
dick
like
for saying that.
that's what Thaddeus Russell's all about.
I am joined from Walnut Creek, California, which is right over the hill from me, by Alex Hatch. And the reason she is here is that I found her company, this startup called Mantafly.com. And I mean this. She actually signed up for Renegade University, and I just looked at her email address and I thought that was an interesting sounding name. I thought maybe there's some interesting project she's behind. And sure enough, I went to the website. This is before she didn't know any of this. And I went to the website, and it turns out that Mantafly essentially is trying to do something that I've been wanting to do, hoping would happen, very excited about for years and years, but no one's ever tried it, which is to help people who are beauticians, I guess, but broadly speaking, who find it extremely difficult to make a living because of the web of regulations and the licensing regime that they have to go through in California and across the country. And I know that, having studied African-American history extensively, I know, and in fact, I've done studies on this, I've done research on this, that there are lots and lots of people in poor neighborhoods, predominantly Black neighborhoods, but not exclusively, but certainly in poor neighborhoods, who do make a living, or they try to make a living, despite what the state and municipal governments throw at them in terms of hurdles to, just being able to braid hair or do nails. I find all that ridiculous. And I also find it to be, if you believe in social justice at all, I mean, I think something that gets in the way of a poor Black woman in East Oakland, where I live, from doing people's nails, who's popular, I think is just absurd and grotesque. So I know that I'll let you talk now, but I'm just so excited about this because I went out and I asked you if you would be willing to sponsor the show so I could help get your word out for what you're doing. And I'll let you speak to what Mantafly is in a second, but I just want people to know that this is my political project, why you're on here. I asked you to do this because I think what you're doing, if you're successful, and you're just a startup, but I think if you're successful at all, it could absolutely, this is the word I used with you when we talked on the phone yesterday, revolutionize the world for a lot of people who suffer from basically what I think is governmental oppression. But why don't you tell everyone just what Mantafly is? It's a fairly simple idea, and tell them like your story and how you got here.
Well, thank you, Thad, for having me on here and contacting me. I love your show, and the Mantafly is a platform that's going to connect clients with traveling beauty professionals. Right now, I'm focusing on the beauty industry, but I hope to eventually expand to other services. Let's see, what else?
So it's an online marketplace, basically.
Yes.
And so you're not actually even taking any money, right? Not now. At least that's not the major plan, right?
That's correct.
You're just facilitating.
Anyone can sign up. Yes, and there is going to be a payment feature in the app that people can use as convenience, but they don't have to. Because I don't think, I mean, for one, I want to help people. I think this can help people. I was really bothered by the shutdown and all of the unemployment and people losing their businesses over the summer. That's a big piece of why I'm doing this. I think it can help people get back to work. I think it can help people feel safe in their homes, getting these treatments. What else?
And if you're not licensed, you do say that you have to follow the laws on your site, right? But if you're not licensed, you can still start to build your business in a real way using Mantafly.
Yes.
Right?
In the application, you can self-report your licensing status. So you can report whether or not you're licensed, in training, or you can leave it blank. And we don't check that or verify that. I think most people are going to care more about the person and the job that's being done than the licensing status. So in the app, you'll see reviews and you can see pictures of the vendor's work. You can see pictures that people have posted in reviews. So I think that's kind of the thing that most people are going to care about.
To
more
to to make it, to sort of boil it down, I think you said to me it's DoorDash for beauticians. Is that right?
Yeah, it's like DoorDash for beauty treatments.
Right,
Yes.
right. So people, right. So you just go on the site. If you're a customer, you can just scroll through and look through. You can search for people based on their reviews and their particular skills and expertise, right? So shopping for customers, and they will come to your house to do this work, right? Or you can go to their house, whatever, but either way. And then,
Yes.
and then for vendors, it's where it's really revolutionary, right? Because you're just cutting through all the middlemen and making it so much easier. Again, for people who don't have any capital. This is usually what we're talking about. This is not just small businesses. We're talking about microscopic businesses in terms of capital. We're talking about usually individuals, usually from neighborhoods that are, as I said, not wealthy, who have very little in the way of resources. So it's just a phenomenally, and you and I said this, we were both shocked that no one's done this before, right?
Yeah, that was a big piece when I came up with the idea, I kept thinking, I can't believe this doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And if I don't build this, someone else will.
Yeah, exactly. So you told me a story about a woman who I think found out about Mantafly, and you want to tell that story?
Yes, sure. So I think this has the potential to be big and change the world in a positive way. And that keeps me going. There was a woman who called me out of the blue because I posted the phone number for Mantafly online, and she has 4 kids. She does hair braiding and dreadlocks, and her husband left her during the pandemic.
Oh my God.
And she was worried about being able to support her family. So while she was talking to me, she told me Mantafly is giving her hope, and that affected me in a profound way because I feel like so many people can benefit from this and may rely on it, and that responsibility is huge. It's almost crushing.
Yeah. This is what you're trying to do, is to create a truly free market for these people. And you and I believe, maybe other people don't believe, but we believe that if they're given that structure, or lack of structure, I suppose, that they will flourish, that people they'll make they've been doing it already, right? If you know anything about these kinds of neighborhoods, you know that it's very, very common for people to get services from people who haven't crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's with the state of California, right? It's a huge portion of the sort of counter economic society, in many neighborhoods. And as I said, I just think, and the story you told me, I think there's going to be countless people, mostly women, but not exclusively, but a lot of women, and I think definitely disproportionately minority women, and certainly disproportionately women who are working class or poor. I think it's going to be a revolution, and I want to be a part of it. That's why I asked you to do this. And I want to just make it successful. I told you yesterday, I said, I would be so proud if I had anything to do with the success of Mantafly.
That would be amazing.
And I think that a lot, and one of the reasons, sorry to cut you off, but one of the reasons I wanted to put this on the show is that I know that a lot of my listeners, we have a school of agorism at Renegade University we're trying to develop. And I know that a lot of my listeners are extremely interested in this kind of project and the cause, the politics behind it, in a sense. And I think a lot of people would want to help you because you're still a startup. You're looking for help in various ways. And I'm pretty sure you're going to get some help from unregistered listeners. So why don't you talk about like what they can do and what's possible for them in terms of participating and maybe even becoming a part, of your project.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Thanks. So right now I'm funding this project all myself, and I'm paying a team of developers to develop it. They're working on it. We're almost done with that. I could use help. I don't doing anything and everything, right? So a big thing would be is if anyone is interested in getting involved, if they could email me. You can email me. That would be amazing. If anyone follows me on any of the social media sites, that would be awesome. It would be nice to know that there are people who are excited about this project, who understand what it is. Because right now I feel like most of my following are people in the beauty industry who might offer these services, who are excited about it, and people who are excited to receive these services. But I don't know how much of the philosophy, like this project is really about politics and philosophy, and I'm not sure if people are getting that. So it'd be nice to have people on board who understand that.
It is very much, as I said, it is very much about political philosophy, you know, and changing the world in that way. But my goodness, I told you yesterday, I was basically begging you to do like a microfinancing round so that I can invest in the company. And I think, if you went that route at all, I mean, I think it's a huge potential moneymaker, because we're talking about national, it could even be international, you know, who knows? And how many women, how many people, not just women, but people use these services already, but, you know, in ways that are very difficult, but just to facilitate that exchange, you know, it's just going to be incredible. So I think it could be explosive, both, you know, financially in a good way, you know, for anybody who's invested in the company, but certainly, you know, for people who use it. So what's your email address, and where should people go, and how should they get in touch with you to be a part of this?
My email address is alex@mantifly.com. And you can find me at Mantifly, MANTIFLY, on all the sites. Every time I hear of a new social networking site, I go on and I sign up as Mantifly. So I think pretty much all of them. If you don't see me on there, email me and tell me to join.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, and those links and your email address will be in the description on YouTube right here, and in the description for the podcast too. So, Alex, we're going to do something. You're going to do something, and I just want to help you. And thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for allowing me to do this. As I said, it's kind of like the project I've been waiting for to get behind. So thanks again, and thank you. We'll talk very soon.
Thank you, Thad. This is great. Thank you so much.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
But it's also that, and this is the thing that, you know, the Trump is like, Donald Trump himself is like the least interesting part of the story. You know, it's like the left kind of like, it's more like what he represents and what he says about where we are. That's interesting, you know, but like the left projects this thing onto Donald Trump that doesn't exist. It's like this literally Hitler, you know, stuff.
Right.
And then the right projects this stuff onto Donald Trump that doesn't exist. Like he's the warrior of the people, and he cares about us and all this stuff. And the reality is just what you see is what you get.
Yeah.
It's him. You already know him. Yeah. You knew him for 30 years before he got here. He just is Donald Trump. He's that shallow, that superficial, that narcissistic, that self-absorbed. He's that guy. And the frustrating thing is that Trump had in some ways an opportunity that no one else has ever had in my life to really be like somebody who could shake up the system. And even the thing you're saying where he was talking about, you know, instituting patriotic education and all this shit, Donald Trump, and he said this, right? Like this is, or one of his people says, when he made the move to ban critical race theory, stuff in the military and in the federal government, he was watching Fox News and heard like Tucker Carlson or someone talking about critical race theory and went, what? They're teaching this to the military? No, I don't want that. The guy had no idea. He is that much of an ignoramus when it comes to these things. He didn't know what it was, had no idea. It's like, why didn't he do this 3 years ago? Because he didn't fucking know what any of this was 3 years ago. And the thing, he just put Douglas McGregor in as the top advisor to the defense secretary, who's like the guy you'd want to have in there. Like literally the guy to end all these wars. Serious colonel, knows what he's fucking doing.
Goddamn late,
he
Donald.
puts him in now, after the freaking election, when he's got a month and a half to maybe make it happen. Could have done this day one. So it's just so frustrating. But then I realized that I'm also projecting this hope onto Donald Trump that he could maybe actually have meant it when he said he was going to end these wars, which, you know, is silly because he's just Trump.
It's interesting why he's doing the big anti-war push at the end. I don't even know what to make of that. I really don't. Like, why now?
I think it's literally just a threat you screwed me over, I'm going to screw you over. And I think for whatever reason, Trump does know that that is the best way to kind of freak out the CIA types, is to go like, yeah, well, how about I end your wars?
Right.
And then they're all kind of like, ooh.
Rank and file Democrats hate him because he's Archie Bunker, because he represents the old bad America, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's Shelby Steele's brilliant argument, by the way. But the elite Democrats who are smart, who actually know what's going on, they hate him because of foreign policy.
Yes.
That's why.
Well, they hate him for sure. It's centered around foreign policy. And I think that this is like a thing I've repeated over and over for years, but just try to drive into people's heads that like your left-wing friend might hate Donald Trump and the CIA might hate Donald Trump, but they don't hate him for the same reasons. Right. And don't for a second believe that the CIA hates Donald Trump because he said insensitive things about Mexicans. Okay, that is not what motivates them.
But do you ever want to be on the side of the CIA? That's the thing. If I'm ever on the side of the CIA, I can't be. It's impossible. There's no way. There's nothing they and I agree on, right?
Right. Well, I mean, it'd have to be someone really bad, who you're
I suppose
who you're allying against. I mean, I don't know. It'd at least be.
Would the CIA be opposed to an actual Hitler? I don't know.
Yeah, well, who knows?
Probably
they might
not.
be trying to overthrow him so they can steal all his scientists or something. But they but it would make you at least want to question very seriously what side you're on.
Yeah.
But I think that Donald Trump is a wild man. Mm-hmm. And he is incapable, whether he wants to or not, he is not capable of stopping himself from blurting things out. Mm-hmm. And he actually would blurt out a lot of true things. Do you remember the movie? Was it a Mel Gibson movie? I think Conspiracy Theory or something like that. I don't know. I haven't seen this movie in forever, but he was just this nutty conspiracy theorist and like a crazy person. And then all of a sudden the government started coming after him, and it turned out he hit one of the right conspiracies. I forget exactly the plot of the movie, but Donald Trump would just blurt out so many things. But if you listen to some of the things he blurted out in his 2016 election, I mean, he blurted out that they lied us into the war in Iraq. Yep. And he also blurted out, which is my personal favorite, that Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton created ISIS.
I know.
And he would say that repeatedly. It wasn't just like one time he stuck it out. And by the way, I mean, they kind of did.
They did.
Like I guess you could say they didn't create them, but they gave them a whole bunch of weapons and money. They created the threat that was ISIS for sure. And that is, as the great Scott Horton has pointed out many times, this was done by John Brennan when he was the head of the CIA under the Barack Obama administration, started in 2012. And this was literally treason. Now, this term treason gets thrown around a lot. But a lot of times people say it, but it has nothing to do with treason. Treason is giving aid and comfort to the enemy. Oh. This is literally treason.
Oh, my God, I forgot. Speaking of treason, holy Christ, this thing about Syria and how the diplomats in Syria hid the number of troop levels from the executive office. I was like, this can't be real. I haven't seen it. Has there been a follow-up on that? I just saw that like 2 days ago. Has there been anything since then? I don't know.
I just saw the same thing. Jim Jeffries, I believe, was the guy who said that they misled the president, and it's being celebrated by the corporate press.
I mean, that might be the worst and craziest thing I've heard in the last 5 years of just saying a world. I mean, what? Like the commander-in-chief is being lied to about the number of soldiers we have in a country deployed there, a controversial country, right? A country in which I was in the fucking streets about 5 years ago to stop Obama bombing it, whenever that was, right?
Yeah.
And now, so that's not a country we don't care about. And you keeping the number, I mean, treason, like that's heads on pikes, man.
Well, it should be something. I mean, it should I mean, it's Syria has been at the center of all of this, like it's really, Syria is a really interesting player. That's kind of like this nexus of a whole bunch of different countries. And it's all part of like the kind of neocon, neo-lib plan to be the next regime change. It's also an area where Iran's involved, Russia's involved, Turkey's involved, But and Donald Trump ran, I mean, very strongly on we should get out of Syria. And then he's flirted with the idea as president many times. And so it's just when you see like John Brennan on the news talking about how uniquely evil Donald Trump is, I mean, this is the guy who will, I mean, he will slaughter children for no problem and lose no sleep over it, So just when you hear that, it's like, no, I think there's a little something more going on. I think you may not like the guy who is sitting as the commander-in-chief and told everybody that you committed treason. That might be more the issue.
Yeah, I want to talk about foreign policy with you and Biden in a second, but I want to go back to the thing you said that I just think it's so interesting because good Lord, I've thought about the perceptions of Trump so much, but this is it's a really interesting new angle. So what Marxists would call the working class in America, right? As you said, they knew Donald Trump real well. Like they were very familiar with that guy for decades, right? From TV shows mostly. He was a huge TV star. And by the way, that's essentially why he won. This is like
Yeah.
really underestimated as to the importance of that. But they knew who the guy was. He's a reality TV star, which usually means you're really shallow and interested in attention and your ego is inflated and all that stuff. You need your ego stripped. How he went from like basically like a clown that everyone saw as essentially a clown to a Nazi, like overnight, is one of the stranger things. I mean, I guess it's because the elites who run the parties and all the big institutions did not watch The Apprentice. I actually think that's what it comes down to. They were in college where you're told not to watch things like The Apprentice because that's what the working class does. And what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to study the working class and pretend to care about the working class and pass government programs that will control the working class. But you don't ever watch their TV shows or go to Walmart because that's tacky.
Yeah, and they actually have real contempt for every inch of the lifestyle of the working class. Like, yes. Absolutely, yes. And so there's something interesting. Donald Trump. There was, I don't know if you saw. It was actually, I think it was in Canada. There was a thing about this where they were running Home Alone 2, the movie, and they cut out Trump's cameo scene. If anyone just doesn't remember, like the kid, Macaulay Culkin's lost, and he's in the plaza, and he runs into Donald Trump and asks where the elevators are, or something like that, and Trump's like, right down there. And that's it. It's just that. Right. But they cut it out, and they said it was like a time issue or something like that. But it's bullshit. Oh, sure. They cut that out intentionally, And I think it's almost like they can't remind people that this guy was completely accepted and just kind of a silly fun. Oh, it's nice, helpful, right. Mr. Donald Trump, rich guy, fucking that guy. He was the saying. He was the, like, if somebody was like, oh, you buying dinner? You go, what am I, Donald Trump? That was like what you said in the 90s of rich guy, that guy, the rich guy. I think what Donald Trump tapped into was a form of right-wing populism that is an absolute no-go zone for the establishment. Like, you are not allowed to do that. Do you ever read, which by the way is to many people the most controversial of Murray Rothbard's work, but was an article he wrote in 1992 called Right-Wing Populism. Yeah. And it was the article, if you actually go read the article, I think it's brilliant. Really? And I think people really
tell me about this.
They treat it with, let's just say, the least generous interpretation of it that you can.
This is like Rothbard's original sin for a lot of people, right?
Yes.
When he started to flirt with the new right or whatever it was, or
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And what happened was that Rothbard saw what he was hoping would be the emergence of what he called the old right, which was the pre-World War II, very non-interventionist, very kind of like we're a republic, not an empire. Like the people like Robert Taft
so
style.
Much better. I mean, what I would give for, and I still wouldn't vote for them, but what I would give for that old Republican Party who are opposed to all the interventions. Oh man.
Yes, and it was like they were the opposite of the neocons in terms of and the neocons took over the Republican Party and first with the kind of National Review, Bill Buckley style, and then later with the more kind of Israeli dominated neocons, which hung around with the Democrats for a little bit longer before they switched over the Trotskyite types.
I was going to say, the neocons have now that they're back with the Democrats, they've just come back home.
Yeah, really, when you think about it, it wasn't even that long, really, that they were gone.
They're back home, welcome back.
And in many ways more well-suited to be.
Yeah, they seem very comfortable there, too. They seem very happy with it. Yeah, they're very, Bill and company and Kagan's, they're great over there.
They're happy. They have a home now in the Biden administration.
Back to the Blue House, yeah. Totally.
Yeah, right. So when the Soviet Union collapsed, and there was this kind of paleo-conservative movement, really led by Pat Buchanan, who kind of bought into the neocon bullshit, which was what the neocons would say originally. Bill Buckley famously wrote this almost as a response to libertarians. And Bill Buckley had this piece, I'm blanking on the name of it, but it's this great piece that I believe he wrote in the 60s. And he was basically saying, like, look, basically libertarians are right about everything. Like, you're right. He was like, yeah, the biggest, the biggest threat to human liberty is the state. The great battle of history is slavery versus freedom. You're right. You don't want this big, giant authoritarian bureaucracy. But there is the Soviet Union, which is the biggest state ever and is going to take over the world. And the only thing that can beat it is a huge military. And therefore, we need this big, giant, bureaucratic, authoritarian mess to fight the Soviet Union. To which Murray Rothbard responded quite brilliantly and hilariously that he said, so we're afraid of a big authoritarian bureaucratic mess, so we'll make sure to just build one ourselves. So, like it was silly from the beginning, but that now Pat Buchanan and some of these people took that seriously. And they were like, okay, we're going to go fight this Cold War. And then when the Soviet Union collapsed, they were like, great. We're done. Now we can go back to being a normal country again. Now we can go back to being the city on the hill, a republic, not an empire. And he found out. And then the George H.W. Bush crowd was like, we got to go see about the Saddam Hussein guy. There was just a new justification. But anyway, so Rothbard was really intrigued by this. But the article, Right-Wing Populism, he starts off talking about David Duke's run for governor of Louisiana, I believe. And he goes, well, they finally got David Duke. They had brought him down after this huge media campaign to destroy his candidacy. He was polling at like 60% at one point, but they ended up really, damaging him and taking him down. And he goes through the whole thing. And what he said at one point in it was, he goes, interestingly enough, there was nothing that David Duke was running on that would really be objectionable to a libertarian. Now, they spin this as saying that he was like, praising David Duke or endorsing him. But he goes, look, it's just kind of interesting that the guy was basically running on being against affirmative action, being against the warfare state, being against all these different things. Now, he may have had his own reasoning for why he was doing that. But the point that Murray Rothbard makes, if you're willing to unclutch your pearls and actually read the article, what he was saying in the article is, he goes, well, look, why are they so outraged by David Duke? What is it? And they say, oh, it's because he was like a radical in his 20s. And they're like, if he was a leftist radical in his 20s, they would be praising him for working within the system. You know what I mean? They go, oh, well, maybe it's because he was in the Ku Klux Klan. He goes, okay, but then explain Robert Byrd, and he lists like 3 other guys who were in the Klan who were all accepted. He goes, so what was it really about David Duke that drove them all crazy? And his conclusion, more or less, is that he embraced anti-establishment right-wing populism, and that they see this as the biggest threat to the establishment, which I got to say, I still today, I think is kind of true. I think in many ways that is, in terms of what could actually gain you 73 million votes and be anti-establishment. Look at this. I mean, the Democratic Socialist, shit, that ain't going to win. That's not going to win an election for you. It's even, I don't even know if you could win a Democratic primary with it. I mean, maybe if they don't cheat Bernie out of it, he could win it. The woke shit is not winning anything. No one who runs on the woke shit can fucking win anything. But right-wing populism, it does seem like most of the country, or I shouldn't say most of the country, a large portion of the country can be won over by a mix of kind of social conservatism, economic populism, not kind of this doctrinaire libertarian stuff that I like and that you like, but kind of economic populism, non-interventionism, maybe even isolationism, strong borders. It's an overwhelming majority of people who don't really want, like high levels of immigration. And so I think it's possible that Trump ran on something that was just unacceptable to the establishment.
You're 100% right. It's you're 100% right. Your analysis of the establishment's rejection of him as like an allergic reaction almost. But the problem with the right-wing populism is that it's all nationalism. It's all within nationalism. So even the good stuff, even the stuff that we like, the anti-interventionist stuff, the foreign policy stuff, it's because of America first, the America first idea, which is gross and disgusting and totalitarian. And guess what it does lead to, guys, dumb shits? It leads to more wars. What do you think all the wars of the last 200 years have been about?
Yeah. Well, there's no question there's a lot of problems with nationalism. And even like a guy like Trump, I mean, you know, can you imagine if like a 9/11 style event happened under Trump's watch?
Oh
In
God,
many ways, it's scarier than Bush or Biden.
I
I
don't
mean,
even
you know, like
know.
what he would do in response to prove what a big nationalist dick he had is truly terrifying. So
Yeah,
I mean, I think he'd be trying to drop H bombs on countries. So you know, it's
he might.
there's a lot. You're absolutely right that nationalism in a lot of ways is responsible for us getting to the place where globalism or whatever, you know, democratic establishment neoliberalism took us. And so no, it's not a perfect solution, but it is a threat to the order. And I think
Yeah.
that's what they don't like about it.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, I'm just trying to think through this. So it's basically the globalism is misunderstood, I think, you know, by critics of it on the left and the right. It's a nationalist globalism. It's an it's an American globalism. This is American imperialism. It's not like Woodrow Wilson and FDR and Kennedy and Johnson and Obama and Clinton wanted to have, you know, the United States to just be in a kumbaya, you know, United Nations led world. They want the United States to be at the top of the damn thing and always have, and they want to remake much of the world in our image. This is very clear. It's just that, so now they're opposed to, and your analysis is dead right, they're opposed to just a nationalist localism, I suppose, or an isolationism, I guess you could call it in more primitive ways, but neither one is good. And I'm just saying that the nationalism is the origin of all the fucking wars, you know, across the world over the last 2 centuries.
Yeah, it's really interesting how like nationalism became kind of like a dirty word to the establishment. And I was you know, when Donald Trump had that thing, I don't remember, it was like a couple of years ago, where he's like, you know, they say nationalist is such a bad thing. I'm a nationalist, folks. I'm a nationalist. And they're like, oh my God, this is a dog whistle to fucking something. And someone was sharing like a John McCain, the great John McCain quote, where they were like, John McCain always said, country first. I always put my country first. And I tweeted something about someone had tweeted this out, and I was like, how is this different from America first? Well, how is saying America first toxic, but saying country first is okay? Your country is America, right? Like, it's like all of this stuff is done under a banner of one form of nationalism or another.
Yeah. Right. It's just the Democrats have less, their flags aren't quite as big, and they don't put them on the front porch, you know?
Yeah.
But their nationalism guides all of their politics. It always has.
But it's a strange form of it. It's like the Democratic establishment form of nationalism is like, you shouldn't really be proud of your country. You should feel horrible about the original sin of your country. You should be constantly apologizing for it, but we should also be dominating the world.
Well, that's the woke.
It's a very strange form.
That's the new woke intervention. And that's why, you know, it's going to be interesting to see what the woke intervention does in terms of its, but you know, the old school liberals hate the woke stuff for that. For that very reason. Right. And that's a fight that's going to play out right now. And I don't know.
Some of the principled leftists do too. I mean, I think that there are some of the more principled, you know, economic leftists who recognize how stupid this whole thing is, and who also, I mean, I'd imagine, I know there's some of them. I mean, I actually don't know. Ben Burgess, the guy I mentioned earlier, he has a new book coming out. I haven't read it; it's not out yet. But the title is "Canceling Comedians While the World Burns."
Oh wow!
Which I was like, oh, that's a really great title. I'm really interested to read that book. But there's got to be a few of the Democratic socialists who see J.P. Morgan Chase hanging Black Lives Matter signs and are like, no, fuck that. Like, this doesn't make you cool. Like, we want your profits, not your, you know, gestures.
Yeah. I mean, well, the infighting that goes on necessarily when you embrace identity politics. I mean, Kamala Harris was calling her running mate a racist just a few months ago. I mean, come on now. And she has to. She's obligated to do that. I mean, according to woke politics. So she's going to get a lot of pressure, I would imagine. And by the way, have you seen the street fights between the BLM and the Biden people? It's recently.
Oh no!
There've been
between Biden people and Black Lives Matter. Really?
Yes.
No, I didn't see that.
Yeah, there've been several like actual street fights where there's like BLM people get at it like fistfights with Biden supporters. Yeah, because and people marching through the streets calling Biden a criminal and, for the crime bill. I mean, the BLM is on his ass about this. Now,
That's interesting.
their alternatives are scary too, but at least they're anti-Biden. So, I mean, that coalition that you talked about, that funky, weird Democratic coalition that doesn't really make sense in a lot of ways, I think it's going to break apart. I don't know, man. The AOCs and Ilhan Omar's and this whole new crew, they don't fit with the old Democratic Party, the Clinton Obama.
Yeah.
They use the woke politics, but they're not into it. They're into
controlling. Oh no, it's just a tool. It's just
controlling the world.
Yeah. And there is something like there's so many, and this is why, it's true, as you said before, it's true for the Republicans too, to some degree, but not like with the Democrats. Like the Democrats, especially now in this Biden campaign, they have this tent that includes people who could not, like, you have a home for the neocons and for Ilhan Omar.
Right.
Do you know how much Ilhan Omar does not like neocons?
Right.
Like, she is not on board with it. In fact, she was tweeting something the other day about one of the neocons. Fuck, I can't remember, but he's like one of the Lincoln Project grifters. And she was tweeting something from him back in 2013 when he was talking about, like, Muslim extremism and how crazy these Muslims are and how they need to be killed and wiped off the map and all this stuff. And it's like, oh yeah, that's right. You were fine with all this bigotry when it was selling the war you wanted. You just oppose it now that, like, you think Donald Trump's using it to his advantage. But it's so that's a real interesting, what you're telling me, this like proud Muslim who hates American imperialism is supposed to sit down with the Cheneyites and get along with them.
And is no fan of Israel.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure.
And the neocons sure are. Yeah,
yes.
I never thought about that. The coalition includes Bill Kristol and Ilhan Omar.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's going to be something that's got to be, and the rude awakening for the hard left in this country is going to be realizing that Bill Kristol's going to have a hell of a lot more influence over the Biden administration than Ilhan Omar will. This is why it was always, I don't know, it might have been effective campaigning to some degree, but Trump's whole, like, Joe Biden's a Trojan horse for socialism shit was so stupid, such a bullshit argument. He's just using some of this language to try to get votes. He doesn't care. It was actually kind of funny when Biden had that moment, which I actually think was one of his strongest moments in the campaign. There weren't too many, but where he said, where he gave the speech on rioting, he finally had to, and he goes, Trump's saying I'm a socialist. Look at me. You know me. Am I some socialist who's okay with violence in the streets? And it's weird. I very rarely have a moment where I kind of empathize with Joe Biden, but you're like, yeah, you're right. You're totally not. You would lock every last one of them up if it were politically expedient.
Of course.
You're just a corrupt politician. You're like, dude, I'm not a socialist. I'm the credit card company's guy. Like, what do you mean? And he's right. He's right. He's much closer to a Cheneyite than he is to a socialist.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, he was the one when he was he was in the chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, I believe, with the Iraq invasion. And he was like, there's a picture of him like smiling at Bush as he's signing the authorization to use military force.
He was the guy demonizing anyone else who dared not vote for the war in Iraq. Like, that was his role.
And it's funny, the left, I would say, they did a decent job of exposing him and Kamala for their history on criminal justice. I think they did a good job on that, as good as they could, right? They were against the liberal establishment, but they were very hot about that for a long time. No one mentioned their foreign policy, Biden and Kamala's, which is like 100% terrible, pretty much. I mean, I think Biden with Vietnam, he came out against it, but so did everybody, but he was late on that. But that was also when everybody in the Democratic Party had to be against the Vietnam War. This is during Nixon, right? But since then, I read a history of his positions on foreign policy. Basically, since like Reagan, he's been a straight up neocon, whatever you want to call it. Like,
it's really amazing how far you can go back. But he's like, he was good on the War of 1812, but he really started slipping right around the Civil War. I believe he did not support George H.W. Bush's war in Iraq. But I think since then he's supported every one of them. I think he felt really bad about that. And that's like his big regret. Yeah. And he's supported everything since then. Okay. There are reports, I don't know if this is true or not. There are some reports that he was one of the more hesitant members of Obama's cabinet on the Libya deal. that he didn't really think it was a good idea to
Right.
overthrow Gaddafi,
Right.
and that Hillary Clinton was really pushing for it. Gates wanted it.
That's
Obama said he was right on the edge. So he might be, if we're being completely fair, he might be a little bit less awful than Hillary Clinton on foreign policy, but only a little bit.
Like
only a little bit.
I mean,
and he's also old and borderline senile and is going to put all the worst people in his cabinet.
Yeah.
It's going to be Susan Rice and fucking, Bill Kristol and people like that.
Yeah, well, his main dude is Tony Blankenship, I think is the guy's name, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they, just look at him. I mean, he's written op-eds saying that we need more boots on the ground in Syria. I mean, he's like straight up about that. I mean, fucking boots on the ground in Syria after all this we've gone through on that country. We've had that debate how many times, and I thought it was resolved, and now they're going to go right back in. I'm terrified, man. Kamala Harris truly scares me, and she will be the president. She and who's going to be president is Bill Clinton, essentially, and Hillary Clinton. I mean, that's the wing that's going to run the show. I mean, all of their acolytes, all of their their people will take over.
Yeah,
but Kamala will be, of course, the main functionary because Joe won't be able to function much. So I'm assuming she'll be the one. And I said this on Twitter, I will admit that she does to me what Trump does to your average middle-aged white liberal woman. Like, she really just gets under my skin and makes me irrational. Like, I hate her in irrational ways. The difference is that I actually know what her policies are. Right?
Sure. Yeah.
But does she, she seems to me to be, Biden is just, you're right, a corrupt politician who will do whatever is expedient, but she seems to have a true authoritarian viciousness about her.
Yeah, I agree. She has a quality that I think Hillary Clinton had.
Yeah.
That is a real, like, she seems like a sociopath. I'm not qualified to diagnose her, but she really gives you that vibe. Very strange things like the Hillary Clinton thing. She seems like she's always trying to act like a human being.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I think this is where a human would laugh.
Exactly.
So let me just start cackling right now. Even though no joke, not even that it wasn't a funny joke, like no joke's been made at all. And you're just bursting out laughing. And the one, I think, and of course she was just, a horrifically vicious prosecutor in California, and just has a terrible record on everything in the Senate. The one silver lining to Joe Biden, who I will say I don't believe will serve out his full term, but the silver lining to a Kamala Harris, presidency is that she will have not been elected. She is horrifically unlikable. She has no charisma, and so that will serve, I think will be a net benefit ultimately. The scariest thing is someone like Barack Obama, who is really charming and likable and can sell a group of people on a war.
Yeah, but she's going to get the yes queen. I mean,
she'll get that.
She's going to ride that the long way. She's going to get a lot of that. Not as much as Obama did, but she's going to get a lot of that.
Yeah. We'll see how much that's good for. It didn't do her much when she was running for president, but it's a different thing once you're in.
So it turns out that the Indians who settled in Jamaica are notorious among Black Jamaicans for being anti-Black racists. And that this is just among Jamaicans. This is what I've heard from several Jamaicans. And that they are known for sort of taking on authoritarian positions in Jamaican society because they are particularly appalled by the culture of ordinary Black Jamaicans. And so they tend to be that kind of person. And so I've heard this theory floated, which makes perfect sense to me, that she's actually acting out that kind of animus toward Black people that her people in Jamaica have been carrying out for, generations since they moved there. I don't know, but
no, that's interesting. I don't know anything about that, but that's really interesting.
But San Francisco, like, what percentage of the criminals in San Francisco do you think are Black? Right. I mean, it's basically every criminal in San Francisco because all the white people are rich, so they don't need to be breaking into houses anymore. So almost exclusively the people that Kamala Harris was putting in jail were brown people, Black and brown people. And why else would you take that job as a prosecutor? Why else would you become a prosecutor? Why would you become a cop? Why would you become a prison guard unless you have some little sadist urge in you, sadistic impulse? I mean, you're going to be hurting people for a living, so you might as well enjoy it, right? I mean, why else? No,
there's for sure. I mean, there's something. Who is attracted to those positions, and this is a big part of the issue with politics in general, but particularly that role. Who is attracted to these positions where you get to rule over other people, decide their fate, lock people in cages? That's not going to attract the people who who you would want to be in those positions for it to ever be a workable system.
She reminds me of every authoritarian vice principal I had in public schools in Berkeley. Because she and I grew up in the same neighborhood, by the way. And
Really?
Yeah, we were both bused. She brags about this. I was in the first. She says I was the first generation. She was in the second generation of school children to be bused in the whole United States. Berkeley was the first city to do that. And of course, she brags about it. I was bused. Remember, that's how she shamed Biden. I was bused, Joe.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh yeah, we were made into objects of a social engineering project. That's right. To a racist social engineering project
that was wildly unpopular, even amongst blacks. Like, wildly unpopular.
Of course, putting your kid on a bus to go to some other neighborhood so he can like make you feel better about your racial justice here. Yeah, it's absurd. Yeah. So, well, what's the prognosis here? I mean, how's this going to affect comedy? It's a tragedy, right, for comedy, or maybe it's not. Maybe it's a good thing for comedy.
I don't know. I mean, the woke shit in general has been bad for comedy, and the reaction to Donald Trump has been bad for comedy. But to me, as far as I'm concerned, like, as long as the tech censorship can be kept at bay, as long as like we're still allowed the internet, then I don't really give a shit. It's like Comedy Central can keep putting on whatever woke garbage they want to and keep watching their ratings take a dive. I don't care about that. It's like, as long as you can make the content you want to make and put it directly out to your audience, then whatever. I think we'll be fine, and there'll still be funny shit out there. There's really funny shit all over the place. It's just not on the networks anymore. That's really what's changed.
Oh, where is the funny shit? Because I haven't seen any.
Oh, dude, there's like, some.
Where do I go?
Tim Dillon.
Yes, yes.
You know who he is?
Everybody's been telling me about him. Yeah.
Dude, he's a monster. Yeah. Just physically, he's a monster. He needs to get his health in order. But he's just a hilarious guy.
Right.
There's really funny, creative shit. I like this Ryan Long guy a lot. I don't know if you've seen any of his sketches. You should check some of his shit out. It's really funny. And then in terms of like stand up, I mean, there's still really great stand ups, going around the country and playing. It's just, you got to like follow them. I'd say like even just completely apolitical people, but Nate Bargatze, I think is one of the funniest people in the country.
Genius.
He's a brilliant comedian. He's one of my best friends too. Just fucking great guy.
Yeah.
Jay Okerson, Louis J. Gomez, of course, my brothers. They're both hilarious. It's all over the place, and there's still like Dave Attell is still touring all the time.
Is he?
It's like, he's the greatest comedian living, in my opinion.
Huh.
And unfortunately, it does seem like for a lot of the kind of like celebrity level comedians, they're very affected by the woke shit, which is too bad.
Right.
But it's that has been surprising to me. It's been surprising to me how they could get so sucked up by it. But I guess I don't know what it's like to be in that situation. I guess like real fame like that is like you get really scared of losing it. And these days you can lose it for a minor infraction. So they watch their P's and Q's.
Well, you work for big corporations when you're at that level, right? And the big corporations obviously have kowtowed to all this stuff. So I guess that's it. But so tell me about the Libertarian Party. I don't really want to talk that much about it, but I mean, you were you were involved in the Mises Caucus trying to reform the Libertarian Party from within, right? And try to bring it back to, or create its, I don't know, a sort of more pure libertarianism, I suppose, within it. It had gone very social justice-y, very left-wing from what I heard. I didn't follow it that closely, but are you still attempting to do that? Is that still part of your project, and why?
Oh, yeah. The takeover will be completed in the next couple of years. It's a libertarian takeover of the Libertarian Party. Right. I really love those guys at the Mises Caucus, Michael Heiss particularly. I just think he's like a great dude, really principled, really smart, really, really hardworking. Right. And our goal for it is just to make, I think that, the libertarian message has never had a better moment than when Ron Paul was running for president. Mm-hmm. And that was when more people were introduced to these ideas and convinced of these ideas than any other time since, in my lifetime, for sure.
Right.
I mean, maybe, you compare Ayn Rand's books or something like that, but you'd have to go all the way back to that to think of a better time for the liberty movement. And it wasn't even a better time because Ron Paul was a way better libertarian than Ayn Rand was. And who wasn't a libertarian, doesn't consider herself one. So to me, it's like we've gone in this direction where, as crazy, as different as Trump is from everybody else, it's just become completely bipartisan consensus now. The idea of the lockdowns. I mean, Trump may have said we shouldn't do them again, but he supported the lockdowns to begin with. The idea of that level of government totalitarianism.
Yes.
And I really don't think, I think the word totalitarianism gets overused, but I don't know how else you can describe the government's actually telling you where you can stand during your Thanksgiving dinner and under what conditions grandma can use the bathroom. I mean, like real deal, the most totalitarian, government action in American history. I mean, like slavery and things like that. But I mean, like,
in my lifetime, in
our lifetimes, and on this mass level.
Yes.
And this has been accepted by the Republicans and the Democrats. Of course, big government spending, just like enslaving our children to debt is accepted. The warfare state is accepted. And I think that the libertarian movement needs a home. And so the goal is to bring the libertarian movement into the Libertarian Party and make that ours. At least let us have this little thing where we can say, okay, this is the alternative view. This is how we feel. I think there's big opportunities during presidential runs to get a message out. And so it's going to be all about actually getting the right candidate. We came into it a little bit too late to change this last election, but we've almost taken control of the party. And I've got a few things up my sleeves. We're about 40% of the party right now. And I've got a few things up my sleeves to make sure that we take it over in the next couple of years.
Oh, wow. Really?
That's my plan.
No hints as to what these are?
You'll find out. I can't tell you yet, but you'll be the first to know.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Just text me, hit me up. So why have LP candidates suck so fucking hard for decades? Why are they always bad? Like, what is that? Because libertarians, I mean, you got talent, they're smart, some charismatic libertarians, not a lot, but there's enough. Like, why can't you pull it together as an LP?
So far the smart charismatic ones never want to do it. They never want to run. And so that's a big part of the issue that needs to be changed. The other thing is that the Libertarian Party, the Liberty Movement, has been operating outside of the Libertarian Party, and they were in the Republican Party basically for the Ron Paul movement, and then just non-politically, affiliated. And the Libertarian Party was just this little thing over that was the remnant of something that Murray Rothbard created, decades ago, that like no one was really like messing around with anymore. And they've got some major cultural problems within the party. And then at the top of the party, there's a bunch of people who are basically as corrupt as people at the top of any political party, and just like, using it for their own personal gain, and a lot of like dirty politics and shit like that. Wild shit that goes on there that I've heard about. But so, that is quickly going to be cleaned up. But there's a major problem that the truth is that the Libertarian Party has become almost like a social club for a lot of truly weird quasi-libertarian people who like to kind of keep it that way. And that's a big part of the reason why the Mises Caucus got so much pushback at first when we first came in. But we're the purest libertarians there. Right. And we're the ones that actually have people who like inspire people and motivate people and have a much bigger audience. And so it's just, the party is ours pretty soon.
Oh, really? You're pretty sure confident about this?
I am very confident. Yes.
Oh, no shit. So for the next election, you think you'll have a good person running?
Yes.
No kidding. Do you have any sense of who that person might be?
I do, but I can't say.
Yeah. Oh, really? That's good. That's almost good enough just for you to say that. Wow. Yeah. Very interesting. Well, Godspeed on that mission. I'm not.
Hey, why not? Got to do something,
I suppose. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it'd be fun. I would do it. I'd run. If someone bankrolled me and would accept up front that I would encourage everyone to not vote for me, I would do it.
Yeah, that second part probably would encourage a lot of people. They'd be like, can we work on this platform of please don't vote for me?
I've heard, no, Libertarian candidates have done that. They've done that.
Yeah,
And they've
have
actually gotten a lot of votes for it. Yeah. They've gotten a lot of votes.
interesting.
Yeah. I think it's not a bad strategy. Man, thanks for hanging out with me. It's always great.
Dude, my pleasure.
Very fun and so much to talk about. And, you know, I'm really envious that you get to enjoy these magical moments with your daughter.
Yeah, it's great. I'm trying to enjoy every moment because I know I'm going to be looking back, missing these days sometime soon.
One thing I was going to tell you, I forgot to say, you know, you have, it's, yes, you do miss like last year and the year before and all that, but I will tell you this, my son's now 19 and we talk politics now and it's a blast. Yeah. It's super
That's pretty
fun.
cool.
So you have that to look forward to if you play your cards right.
Yeah, if we still have a country in 20 years, I'll be able to talk to my daughter about it.
That's right. All right, man. Have a great one. Great to see you. And thanks a lot.
Absolutely, brother. It was a pleasure.
All right. Peace, man. Bye-bye. This is the Unregistered Podcast, and I'm Thaddeus Russell. To join the new Renegade University, go to renegadeuniversity.com. To join the new Unregistered Underground, the supporting listeners group for the podcast, go to unregisteredunderground.com. Thanks for listening.